Alrighty, good morning. It's a Saturday morning here, and I went out and I walked 5 miles, and I ran the dishwasher and made myself a breakfast burrito, and even went outside and worked in the yard a little bit. Ran the weed whacker, and well, yeah, it's been a busy morning so far. But that's not what you want to hear. You want to hear me talking about woodworking or World of Tanks or Loot Crate or something like that. But anyway, that's what this is about. It's about woodworking. And I've been looking for some different types of projects to do, especially if I can get them on, get on the scroll saw and actually take advantage of the capabilities that the scroll saw has. So with that in mind, I went out and I bought a couple of books. One was how to make different kind of scroll saw boxes, and I'm certainly able to utilize that along with the table saw uh, to get some interesting results. But I'm not going to do that right now. What I'm looking at right now, well, is this. And I went out and bought this, and this is off of Amazon. Well, so it didn't really go out, but I went out. Okay, you know what I mean. um, so the plan is to make myself a scroll saw bowl. Now I've done this. I did this before, and I did this years ago. But this is really more of a basket than it is a bowl. And what I'm looking at making is actually something, well, something like this. So I'm going to use some of the techniques talked about in this book, and you get to come along for the ride, I guess. So with that, the first thing I have to do is make a jig. So hang on just a minute. Okay, I said I was going to make a jig, so here it is. And what I did was I grabbed a couple of pieces of half-inch plywood, and this is the birch plywood. You can get this at any hardware store. And I plotted out a circle on it that was, I think in this particular case, 10.5 inches in diameter. That's about right. It could be 10 and a half, 11 inches in diameter. That's about all you need to do. And then I just marked out some lines on there, and I used those lines to lay out a series of holes that I made. Now the idea here is that all these bolts you see sticking through here are going to be centered 1/2 inch from the edge, and these are 3/8 inch bolts with 3/8 inch nuts and 3/8 inch washers on them, and they're going to just go on there just like that. And now this washer is going to screw down all the way on it. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you're drilling holes in plywood is that unless you use a Forstner bit and go very slowly, or you use a countersink bit, you are going to get tear out when that bit drill gets into the wood, unless it's a very small bit. The larger bits will tear out. Now that's not a big deal right now because this is just a jig, and it doesn't matter how it really looks at the end of the day as long as it does the job. But the thing is, you don't want to end up tearing huge chunks of wood out, even out of a jig, well, like that, although that's not too big a deal, because you could end up compromising the integrity of it. So now, show you what I'm doing here with this last one. And you can see how the bolt here is actually sitting a little proud of the plywood. But what's going to happen is, as I tighten this nut down, just the pressure from the nut, or the torque being applied to the nut, is actually going to pull the head of the bolt into the plywood, even if you don't have a lot of tear out. So, and the idea again here is that we're going to end up with a nice, there we go, level base, just like that. Now, maybe you're wondering about the other half, and again, this is a clamping jig is what it is. So I drilled, again, 3/8 inch holes in this upper piece, but then after it was done, I went back and I took one of the bolts that I have here, and I just ran it through the holes on the top Yeah, just like that, but a lot more vigorously. And I actually use the threading in the bolts to tear out some a little bit of the plywood here. Actually act as a rough sander, basically. And the idea there is that it's going to make the whole thing a little easier to slip on and off. So you can get something that looks, well, I guess, kind of like a two-tiered cake. So then you're going to take these wing nuts that I have here, and no, I'm not talking about Air Force guys. I'm just talking about regular wing nuts here, and they're going to screw down over top of these nuts on the top, and as you crank them down, let's see if I can do it here. As you crank them down, what will happen is it'll pull, obviously, this piece down, and then if you have a very large, well, let's see, if you have a very large set of stuff under here that you needed to glue up, so I mean something larger like layers of a bowl, for example, you can use this to get very, very good even clamping pressure. Now, that being said, I need to go back and I need to widen these holes a little bit, just to make it a little easier to get them in place. Not much. I might actually run my 1/2 inch drill bit through there. That might do the trick, although to be honest, I think that might be a little overkill. Best way to do it, obviously, would be to take a 3/8 inch dowel with some sandpaper on it and just scrub each hole out. So that might be the way I go. That would be the way I would go if I had a 3/8 inch dowel. I do not, however. So anyway, I'm going to solve this problem, and with that, I will come back and I will show you the first step in actually making the bowl. So, be right back. Okay, next step. What I have here is a piece of poplar at 3/4 inch thick, and it's about 7 1/4 inches square. Not quite 7 1/4 inches square, which is fine because the pattern here is calling for a 7-inch diameter bowl. So anyway, as you see, I've got some blue tape on the wood, and that's kind of an optional step. I do like doing the blue tape thing for a couple of reasons. First, it gives it a good backing to actually glue the pattern onto the wood. And second, when it's time to come off, the tape just peels right off the wood and it'll take the pattern with it, so you don't have to struggle to get the pattern back off the wood. There is a third reason I like it, and the adhesive on the tape, or sorry, the tape itself, actually helps lubricate the scroll saw blade. Now, what we're going to be doing is since we're going to be tilting this piece of wood as it's going through, the blade's going to actually be going through a bit more wood than usual. So, making sure the blade is going through as smoothly as possible, that's kind of a big deal, especially given that it's my first try. After I do this a few times, or after I do this once, or maybe a few times, we'll see that it may just be simpler just to go ahead and adhere the pattern directly to the wood. We will see. So with that, I think it's time to go outside and start using the scroll saw. Talk to you in a bit. Okay, here we go. I've got my scroll saw tilted to 28 degrees with the left side of the table down. And I've never cut on it like this before, so this is going to be a little tricky. So, well, I hope you enjoy, and, well, let's see how much swearing I do. So, we are off. Okay. Alrighty. Well, that's the first ring cut, and you can see what I got out of this. So here's my scrap. So now what I have to do is, let's see, I'm pretty sure you can see that. Yeah, what I got to do now is I've actually got to drill an entry hole here, although the entry hole needs to be at that same 28-degree angle that I've already cut everything at. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use a piece of scrap wood. I'm just going to run it through run it through the saw blade, and that will give me a nice little visual guide to get it as straight as possible. And then once I actually start cutting, the line will even itself out. So anyway, with that, that's one ring. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 more to go. I don't think you want to watch me cut off that many rings. So you know what? I will be back, and I'm going to show you what it looks like after I've done all the cutting. So with that, sorry, I was looking to that side of the camera instead of that side of the camera where the actual hole is, or sorry, where the actual lens is. It's right there. So anyway, with that, I will be back in a few minutes, and I'll show you how things worked out. Okay, back inside, and I've got all my rings cut. Now, one of the things I did, and this is according to the instructions, if you take a look here carefully, you can see what I made some little tick marks on the inside and the outside of each ring. And what I did was I actually extended the guide marks from the pattern onto the outside. And I even went so far as to label the outside here number 1. This is on the first ring. And then on the second ring, I put a corresponding 1 right there. And then on the opposite side, a 2. I put a T on there for the first couple, but it's easy to tell which is the bottom and which is the top because obviously they slope up and out. Now, they do fit together pretty well. Let me spin this around so they're actually they're lined up. And that's what they're going to look like once I get them done, get them complete, once I get them glued up. But if I do have a concern, the instructions called for using a number 9 scroll saw blade, and those are pretty large. And the smallest drill bit that I could get, or the smallest drill hole that I could drill, and then get that blade in there was a 7/64, maybe a little smaller, maybe a 3/32, something like that. Just a little bit bigger, so you can see the cutout, you can see the drill entry holes. Now, granted, after I glue this up, let the glue set, it is going to have to get sanded very aggressively just to make sure everything fits, because right now there is not a perfect fit between the 2 rings. However, I am concerned that might take off a bit more wood than I want. We'll see. This is the first time I've done this. It's a semi-experimental piece. The better results I get with it, the better. But at the same time, if I'm making mistakes, I will learn from those mistakes. And that's one of the important things that you do when you're, pretty much when you're doing anything. So when I'm going to go ahead, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and glue this up in that clamping jig I made. And then after it's had a chance to properly cure, I'm going to have to go back and I have to be pretty aggressive with the sanding. But you can see, well, in this particular case, how much I'm going to have to take off for it to disappear. The question is, do you need a number 9 blade to do this, or can you get by with say a number 7 blade? Hard to tell. I ran into some hard spots in this, and plus again it was tilted, so you've got an effective you've increased the effective thickness of the wood that you're cutting through. So if you were cutting through shallower wood, you could use a smaller blade pretty easily. If you're cutting through 3/4 inch wood, especially if you're cutting through a harder wood like say maple or cherry, might take you a while, but yeah, you could get through with a smaller blade, I guess. So experimentation is in order. Well, anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and get these clamped up, and I will come back and talk to you in a bit. Bye. Okay, I've got it clamped up, and you might notice got a piece of parchment paper down there, and that's in case I have any glue squeeze out that actually runs down the side of the blank. I don't want to end up gluing the blank to the clamp. So that's that. Then the second part, and I forgot to mention this is important, do not glue the base on to the remainder to all your rings right yet. What you need to do is you need to let the rings set up, and then you're going to have to actually sand the rings down to size, sand them till they, well, not finish sand them, but prep sand them. Then you attach the base, and then you do all your finish sanding with the base on. So anyway, that is it for now. Gotta let that set up. So that's it. All right, here's the glued up bowl blank, with the exception of the base. And I don't remember if I mentioned it in the last half of the video, because that was yesterday for me, not, however many seconds ago for you. But basically, you want to leave the base of the bowl off until you've been able to get the inside down to the point of, well, basically finish sanded. And then once that's happened, go ahead and glue the bottom, go ahead and glue the base onto the bowl, and then finish sand the outside. So now you're looking at it and you're probably thinking, yeah, that's a little not too even there. And yeah, that's true, it's not too even, but that's the way, at least according to the book, that's the way it's going to look. And I am going to have to go through and pretty aggressively sand it. Now you do see that the rings are not particularly thick, but again, that's okay. I don't think that's an issue. One last thing, of course, if you take a look in here, you can see some tick marks that I made, and again, those just extended the guide marks on the pattern. I extended those down the side, and that helped me line everything up. We're going to see how good that looks once I get it sanded down. It should help the grain match up a bit. So anyway, with that, it's time to go outside and do some sanding. And unfortunately, this is going to be one of those cases where it's going to be hand sanding for a while just to get the big rough spots off. I do not have a drum sander, which would be the ideal way to do this. I did order some attachments for my drill from Amazon. They haven't gotten here yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go outside with some 60 or some 80 or some 100 grit sandpaper and really do some scrubbing. So I'll be back and show you what that looks like here in a bit. Bye. Okay, I took this bad boy out and I sanded it and sanded it and sanded it and sanded it some more, and then I rasped it, and then I sanded it, and then I rasped it some more, then I sanded it some more, and oh man, you can see, again, you can see how uneven it is on the outside, and it was that uneven on the inside. And I did this by hand. I took it down. I don't have my rasp handy, but it was pretty aggressive. So basically what I did was I just took the rasp and worked it in and out just to get these, get the high spots off. And I don't think I'm gonna try that on the inside. I mean on the outside. I'm gonna use my belt sander, hook that up, and just very, very carefully hold it at an angle against the belt and rotate it around. So, but anyway, the next step here is to take this and put a little glue on it, put it on the bottom. Oops, there we go. Put it in the gluing jig and give it a chance to set. And then sometime over the weekend, I'll actually start sanding it. So, yeah, yeah. Okay. Talk to you in a bit. Okay, here it is, and it's all sanded down now. Took a lot of work. As a matter of fact, this came in between the last take and this take. And what this is a flap sander or a flap wheel sander. And all it is, it's sandpaper that's attached to a central hub and in little flaps like this. And it's got a, I don't even know what to call it. Anyway, it goes into the drill. You can use it in a hand drill or drill press. And anyway, what it's going to do, it's going to spin, and I used that in here, and that did a really, really good job of leveling things out and cleaning up the burr marks. However, of course, I still had to go back and hand sand it down to a finished state. So with that in mind, I did spend a lot of time sanding on the inside. Now the outside, I think it came out really, really well. Somewhat better than the inside, simply because I was able to set it on my my belt sander, and as the belt sander was running, it was actually causing this to spin, so I was able to get a good even finish on it, something a lot easier than I was able to do in here. Obviously, I think the best solution would be to get the spindle sander, but there's some other options as far, like I said, there's other options as far as hand sanding and stuff, but it's going to take some more experimenting and probably some more money to buy more stuff. So anyway, next step right now is to get it over onto the vacuum cleaner right there and get as much of the sanding dust off I can, and I'm going to tack it down, and then I'm going to use some spray shellac on it, and I'll show you what it looks like once I've finished finishing it. So back in a minute. All right, it might be a little hard to see. It's that white spot right there on the ring there, and then on the outside there, and then there's another spot. Yeah, there it is right there. That's where I was using, I'd spread on some white glue, and then I pushed some sawdust into it to help fill in some cracks. Well, not too successfully. Anyway, what I'm going to have to do is, so the finish is going to look right, I'm going to have to go back and hand sand those areas back down. And obviously I thought I had done a fairly good job of sanding them down, but they didn't show up until after I put a coat of shellac on. So that means going out and yeah, talk to you in a bit. Okay, here it is. One finished and finished scroll saw bowl. And overall, I'm actually pretty pleased with the outcome, although I'm going to grade myself harshly and say B-, and that's going to be primarily for a couple of spots like right there, another little one in here where, well, basically I wasn't able to, I didn't feel comfortable sanding it all the way down to where I had the entry holes for the scroll saw blades, but what I would do next time is I would actually drill smaller holes, use a smaller blade. But anyway, take another quick look at it. Again, it's made out of poplar, and poplar is a fairly soft wood, so it's fairly easy to work. It's cheap, which is important, because if you screw something up with it, then it's not that big a deal to go back around and use another one, cut some more pieces and try again. But this is the original piece. This is the first time I've done this. So anyway, like I said, when I sanded it, I forgot to mention, after I did the power sanding and everything on it, I ended up hand sanding it with some 220, and then I hand sanded it with some 400 grit stuff, just to get a really, really smooth finish. Then, speaking of finish, I just used some spray shellac on it, which is what was recommended by the book, but there's nothing that would have stopped me from using a spray polyurethane on it, or rubbing a Danish oil finish into it, or using the mineral oil beeswax combination like I did on the cutting board. It just depends on what you want to try doing with different finishes. Different woods do look different under different finishes, and that's something to take into account when you're doing something like this. But the main frustration with this, was sanding the inside of the bowl, and even with the base of it off, that was tough to do. A lot of work, a lot of time just spent there rubbing. That flap wheel I got really did the job. And again, there's some other attachments out there. There's a little inflatable drum sander that you can get. Again, you can use it on a drill press or on a hand drill. A spindle sander would have been ideal. So yeah, and I'm just beating a dead horse here. But anyway, like I said, shellac is a food safe finish. Once it's 100% cured, this is probably about 90% cured. So it's very, very easy to apply a couple of coats. So anyway, what I did was I just sprayed on a coat and then let it dry. Got it, buffed it with some 400 grit sandpaper. Did a great job of getting all the dust off. Sorry, a careful job of getting all the dust off, and then give it another coat. and it ended up with, I think, 3 coats on here total. The shellac actually dries very, very quickly. So one thing you do have to be careful with the shellac is that you don't get alcohol on it, because alcohol will dissolve the finish. So yeah. So that's that. It's not particularly large. It's only about 6 or 7 inches in diameter, and about the same height. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So not even that high. But like I said, I think it came out looking pretty good. So I've got some ideas for what I'm going to do next. It might be another one of these, but I have something that's a little crazier, if you will. So stick with me. Please be patient, and I will talk to you later. Bye.